Maps represent our lives, our inner landscape, our lived experiences, and the people that have shaped us. Our lives are a dynamic narrative that can be informative and entertaining. What I would ask all of us to do is to remind ourselves that where we are is an invitation to explore and to enjoy our present state and the people that are around it.
Because in doing so, you learn to love your map, to not be ashamed of, not just hide it away, but put dignity and compassion towards how you've been created and wired and how you go about your life.
You are listening to the Leadership Vision Podcast, our show helping you build positive team culture. Our consulting firm has been doing this work for the past 25 years so that leaders are mentally engaged and emotionally healthy. To learn more about our work, you can click the link in the show notes or visit us on the web at leadershipvisionconsulting.com. Hello, everyone. My name is Nathan Freeburg, and what if the story of your life, every moment of joy, pain, transition, or insight, wasn't just something that you went through, but part of a deeper map that makes you who you are? In today's episode of the Leadership Vision Podcast, I'm joined by Dr. Linda and Brian Schubring, co-authors of Unfolded, Lessons in Transformation from an Origami Crane, and we're diving into the powerful concept at the heart of the book, the idea that we're all made out of maps. These maps aren't just metaphors, they're inner landscapes shaped by memory, values, biology, relationship, and when life folds us through change or challenge, we're not breaking, we're being shaped. Together, we're going to explore and unpack what it means to be both the map maker and the traveler in your own story. How do we honor the paths we've walked, navigate uncertainty, and choose our next fold with purpose? This conversation is an invitation to see yourself and your life unfolding with new eyes. Let's get into it. Brian and Linda, welcome back to the Leadership Vision Podcast.
Thank you, Nathan. Good to see you.
Good to see you. I'm excited to jump in and talk about maps. It is probably the concept that I both understand the best and am completely confused by in the book. It seems like, oh yeah, we're made of maps. That makes sense. But then I dig it and I'm like, wait, what does that mean exactly? So maybe just to kind of kick things off here, tell us about maps. Why did you use a map that is also a piece of origami as kind of the central core idea of the book?
Well, first of all, I've been familiar with maps as a metaphor for one's internal landscape for many, many decades. I think I was first introduced to the idea when I was in college. So this idea of our inner landscape being a map has kind of always been with me. And by inner landscape, we mean like those elements about each one of us that make us who we are, our personality, our unique characteristics, our talents, our ability, our potential, our possibility are all parts of our inner landscape. It's a map that reflects where we've been. It kind of points us in the direction of where we're going. And oftentimes that inner landscape can be really, really familiar to us, known and well-traveled. And there are other parts of ourselves that could be those parts of the maps that could remain hidden for most of our lives, places where we don't really explore that often, but they're still there. And so when we introduce maps in this book, we are talking about each individual character is made of a unique map. That point is to illustrate that every person has unique characteristics and attributes about them, their own unique map. And the invitation of the book is, how can we better understand our own map, and how can we be helpful to others as they're seeking to better understand their own internal map?
Maps have been a great metaphor for leadership in a variety of different ways. You can read lots of books about people helping you, navigate your map, get from one place to another. What we find is people often look at a map and they you start with where you are now, and then you end with a destination. And how do we get from here to there? And there's many paths to do that. And our conversation around using map paper for these animals is more about, but what else is on your map? What about the things that you don't see or haven't noticed? Why are you drawn to the color blue? If you have a heat map, what does that mean? What does that mean for you? that it isn't just about start here and there. It is about understanding the nuances of what is happening around you, how you've been shaped, and how all these culminating factors come together and allow you to express the most full version of who you are.
My family go on a lot of road trips in the summertime. And do you remember the big Rand McNally maps?
Yes.
The 50 state maps. It was
Yes.
this huge, for those of you who don't remember, it was this giant book that had, a couple pages for every state. And I remember my brother and I used to love, like we go across the country, these long trips. We used to love looking at these maps and being like, okay, so we're starting in, Minnesota or Michigan when we moved there, and we're going through this state, and what's along the way, and can we stop here? And, oh, Dad, look at this. We found this, random thing. I wonder how much of our lives with, Google Maps, you just type in the destination and you just blindly drive, is we kind of miss some of that journey along the way. Brian, you said that part of our map is hidden on purpose. And I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit more about that, because, there's something about the Google Map thing that's very efficient. You get from A to B, you just go. But there's something, I don't know, are we losing something by hiding certain parts of our journey that we're like kind of ignoring because we don't want to pay attention to a little detour that might lead you to the largest ball of twine in the world? I don't know if you can see where I'm going with this.
Well, there's a lot. Oh my gosh, there's so much there. One of the
You've
things
opened up an atlas.
one of the things I think
Little
is
Rand
interesting
McNally.
about what you're saying, Nathan, is that when you're using like a Google Map system as your navigational system, you're primarily looking at lines and branches off the lines to get you from one point to another, and not what's necessarily in between or the elements that are along the way. I think that type of quick answer and direct naturedness of a Google Map is something that I'm trying to kind of tap into as an invitation to avoid that, because I think what you and your brother experienced is more akin to what it is that we're inviting readers to do, and that is to notice the nuances and the narratives and the places and the people that are represented on their own maps, and to be reminded of who those people are, what those events mean to their lives, and what are the lessons that they've learned. Because for us, maps retain the answers to some of the questions that we're looking to today. Some of our maps are the keepers of the life lessons that we've learned in the past that we are needing to use right now. Sometimes when we look into ourselves, we may know what the next steps are because we're reminded of the missteps we've made previously. And that's why I think the invitation of this map is for reflection first and not for action. Because with the Google illustration, I think that navigation system is for action in a specific direction.
Right.
The map in our book is for reflection with an intention for discovery.
And Nathan, when you brought up the atlas or the Rand McNally, do you remember they would have a year? There would be a year attached to it.
My mom would get my dad the new Rand McNally map for every Christmas. It was like a big Christmas gift.
Are you kidding me?
No, it was a big deal. We love maps in our house. Yeah, a new one every year because stuff changes, right?
Okay, so that part changes. So there's also this nuance with our book where you look at a map, and is this the map of when you were born? Because maybe there weren't as many cities or as many pathways, or fast forward 10 years, are there now new bodies of water that have been carved out? Because that's kind of what happened in Minnesota, I think.
They found more.
Right, exactly. So there's this opportunity to realize, like, you're not just the map you were when you were born. There's not just been shaping and folding that has happened, but this spot in time that we are inviting a lot of the people that we're working with, the spot in time to look at what have been some of the shaping experiences, points of growth, what was happening in that space, who's around you, what are you drawn to, and you're kind of getting a feel of maybe what your map looks like.
There's also this idea with origami and obviously the folds, like you're being folded and unfolded. And I can't help but think of those other maps that is just like one state where essentially the way that they folded it from the factory, you can never get it back into that fold again.
Never.
Right? So you open up, it's this huge thing. And I just remember you're trying to follow the creases. You're trying to get it back into the way that it was. And it's like, I don't know what's going on. This is not working. Talk a little bit about folds. Like when people are in the middle of a fold, that moment of tension or uncertainty, it's like, am I folding this the right way? I don't think, but I'm committed now. And then eventually you get that map back and you're like, oh, this is folded incorrectly, but it's still back in the original shape. Like, what does that have to do with this story?
Let's pick that question up midstream because when it comes to origami and maps, in the book, all of the origami characters are already fully formed. And so that right there represents how we look at ourselves. If we were to capture an image of what we look like right now, we have been shaped and we are currently occupying a current shape of who we are, how we show up in the world, and how we relate to other people. And based on that shape, and with origami and the paper being made of a map, there are certain parts of our maps that are seen by the outside world, maps that we're familiar reading because they just happen to be the parts of the map that are seen by the way that the character has been folded. And if you look at an Origami Crane, you can focus on one wing, and that shows one part of a map. You focus on the tail, that will show a different part of the map. But still, by looking at a torso or a wing or a neck, you still do not have a complete picture of where that map really represents in the world and what is potentially beneath one of the folds. And so part of the invitation here is sometimes there are certain parts of our map that are well worn. There are habitual pathways and patterns of thinking that we use over and over again, and it's so well known to us. But then what happens when we face some uncertainty or a challenge in life that is new to us? Sometimes those habitual ways of thinking no longer work, and that's where the invitation is to really begin to think, do I have the capacity and do I have the answers within me to face this challenge? And sometimes the only way that we know that is to begin to unfold our current state of being, the current shape we're in, to discover what's hidden beneath the folds. Because most of us do not realize how close the answer is because it's just beneath the fold.
I think you're talking about the inner landscape now, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like the stuff that's in there. I've heard you talk about like those. So when we think about a map, you've got the terrain, the landmarks, borders, edges, sometimes unknown regions, known regions, routes, paths, all kinds of different landmarks. How do you describe that inner landscape or that part within the map?
Well, I would begin with some questions that go like this. That inner landscape. Some questions like, where did you grow up? What were the shaping influences that were there? Were you in an industrial area? Were you in a rural area? Did you grow up in an urban neighborhood? Who were the people that were around you? What was in your home? Who was in your family system? And begin to think of those elements, because those elements are part of our inner landscape. The experiences that we lived, the places we went to school, wherever we played in the playground, those are also part of the inner landscape. I think I would start with those questions because that gives us an indication to where we came from, how we were raised, the beliefs and biases that we're continuing to carry to this day, the friends that we had, and those experiences that were easy, those experiences that were part of the struggle. That's all the composition of our inner landscape.
The invitation is to do some introspection of the components of your inner landscape or your map. And I think there are times where we zero in on one part of the map and we forget what's along the edges. And the fact that the origami characters are all made of squares puts some boundary markers in place for look here, but look all across your entire map. So as we have heard back from readers of Unfolded, they've said, wow, I'm a water person living in a skyscraperville, right? Or their sense of, wow, no wonder I don't fit. Or in the introspection of understanding more of their inner landscape, they can now draw lines to maybe why they don't fit in some of the contexts they do, or why they are a fresh voice or have some purpose at this time in the places that they find themselves.
I can illustrate this.
Yeah, please.
Not quite simply. Our inner landscape reveals something to us that helps in our understanding of why we show up the way that we do today and why we make the decisions and how we form relationships today. When you think about my life and you think about my inner landscape, or what kind of map would I choose to share with other people to help them understand how I show up in the world today? If I were to do that, I would have a map of the neighborhood that I grew up in. The neighborhood that I grew up in, my address was 9025 13th Avenue South. That was a little 900 square foot house, 2-bedroom, 1-bath. It was a row house. You look to the left and to the right, and there was a house exactly like it on each side. That smallness and that sameness was important because at that point, my neighborhood was as big as my world was. At the end of my street was where the hockey rink was, where I played hockey. Just about a half mile away was the football stadium where I played football. And down the road, less than a mile, was the baseball fields where I played baseball. Athletic fields shaped my life. It shaped my relationships. It shaped my competitive nature. And if you understand that part of my inner landscape, you'll understand several things. Number one, I grew up around small neighborhoods, small homes, and small dreams. Second, it's important to know that those athletic fields represent that I grew up playing team sports. And so that team mentality, that athletic mentality, playing together for a certain goal, that stays with me today. And the third thing to know about that small neighborhood is that the teams that I was on, we always won. And so that expectation is still something I carry today. So if you know, like, just that short illustration about who I am, the landscape and the neighborhood and the influences that I grew up in, it really helps you understand how I show up today. Because in response to this small, I dream really big. I still carry that team mentality. I want to partner with people that are gifted and excellent at what they do. And I still want the best outcome for whatever that we're engaged in. And just that mentality helps remind me that when I'm frustrated, there's a reason for that. Because I have high expectations. If I feel like we're missing something on our team, it's because I've always played team sports. And if I dream too big, it's because I came from a place where dreams were small. You weren't really expected to leave the neighborhood. You're expected to grow up and work down the road. Like, that's just what was a part of that environment. So to know that about me can say a lot about how I show up and how I navigate the world within which I live right now.
What's so interesting about what you shared, Brian, is you could have also gone the opposite way. You could have been someone who dreams small. You could have been someone who works down the road. You could have been someone who, just kind of fit right along with that. What do you think it is about you, about your experience, that almost made you go to the opposite?
Well, that's easy.
Okay.
That's easy. Because of where I grew up, the landscape was small and I dreamed small. But here's what changed everything. And that was, my parents had a dream based upon the landscape that they came from. My parents came from a landscape where higher education was not an option and it wasn't possible. And their dream was, how can we get our sons outside of this neighborhood and get them educated so that their world will not represent the world that we came from? And my mom, to this day, still talks about where she grew up and her dream to never return to that place again and to provide opportunities for us so that we could dream and live a life bigger than what she had. That was it. And I know that even though I traveled a lot for athletics, it wasn't until I got to college where I realized, oh my gosh, this world is so much bigger than what I thought. And that just changed everything for me. But it was built on someone else's dream, my parents, for me, that I would not get, quote unquote, stuck, or that I wouldn't remain in that small neighborhood.
Brian, I appreciate the work that you have done to name that specific map in your life. I know that by often sharing an example, it gives hopefully the listener this opportunity to start to consider what does your map look like? And we'll eventually get to maybe some of the shaping influences of the map. But before that, just take a pause, and we'd invite you to consider, where is your map? What would your map look like? Brian had something very specific in this, city structure with playgrounds and athletic fields around. But perhaps you have a map that's mostly water. You have a map that is rooted in the city. You have a map that spans an entire continent. Maybe it crosses different borders. And wherever that is, let the map allow you to do some thinking and consideration of, is this the map that I would describe? And we have done that with a variety of maps. So I feel like we have a map from each part of our history. And so I appreciate that, but I want to invite, like, this is what the invitation is to consider, what is the map of your life. You'll see in the context of the book that these different characters aren't just shaped differently, they're made of different kinds of maps. We made the young Crane, OC's little brother, we made his map look like a Crayola map. Or some kid developed a map that they needed to turn in grade 4 or 3, I don't know. And there's a more nuanced version of a different character. So to know that is to not be confined of, this is your map, this is what it looks like. Sometimes just that exercise can allow us to be grounded into, okay, then what's the next step?
Our inner landscape is compared to a map to help us understand and be reminded of where we came from, the lessons we learned there that are still influencing who we are today. That doesn't mean that we are locked into that one particular area of the world that we grew up, but it is part of our origin story, and it is in some unique way connected to your where and to your why today.
Say that last part again.
Where you're from and that unique landscape will always be a part of who you are. It's part of your origin story. And also, that doesn't mean that you remain in that one place, locked to one environment for the rest of your life, because the pathway that led from that place of beginning is somehow uniquely tied to and makes sense to the place that you occupy today. And my invitation is for us to, with curiosity and openness, look back at our lives and ask ourselves, who helped get us there? What were those turns that I made in life that I'm really, really proud of? What were those missteps or mistakes that I made that somehow got woven in and made a new route to where I am today? Because along that journey, there are so many pieces of wisdom and nuance and story that we can remind ourselves of to help us get through life today. Oh my gosh, there's so much there.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out where to take that, because my first thought before I had you repeat it was, I want to go, hypothetically, I want to go somewhere totally different from where I've come from. Where I came from is a certain way that, while it has shaped me, I perhaps want to forget it or move past it. How do you then use that? And I'm not even talking about like big issues of pain or anything like that. Just like, you know what? I appreciate it, but I don't really want to take any of that with me. Like, is that healthy, unhealthy? How do you sort of navigate that? It is so healthy. Like, okay.
There's two sides. There's two sides of...
Nathan, somehow ask that question, because that's the answer. There are two sides. Because, Nathan, just because we get stuck in a dark valley where we're depressed, there's despair, it doesn't mean we stay there. But we sometimes get lost.
Well, and I'm not going to edit this, but I guess what I'm wondering is how do you use that? So,
Linda has the answer.
How or why is that beneficial to know the map past, to know all of this stuff, to say, I have a different dream, I want to go forward, but I don't necessarily want to take any of that with me.
All right, I'll put it back to you, Nathan.
Oh, dear.
Why did your mom buy a new atlas every year, or roadmap? Rand McNally.
Right. ran McNally. I'd have to get my fact checkers on it. It may have been every other year, but it was because things changed. It was because I think if I'm remembering right, there was also this feature where it was like, new sites along the way. And so that was updated. That changed. Like, I-95, I-94 didn't change necessarily, but there may have been new stuff. Who knows? Also, the map got really beat up after a year of having little boys opening and closing and ripping pages and stuff. So that was part of it too. I don't know if that's helpful to answering this question, but
what we present to the people that we work with when we're speaking in front of a crowd, when we're working with a team, we will emphasize that there are different sides to our maps. There are the sides of our maps that people see, that we put on display, that we're proud of, and there are sides of our map that are kind of tucked away that we don't really talk about. Now, the map that I introduced on this podcast of where I grew up, that is a map that I have tucked away, because there are times where I'm not really proud of that. I don't talk about it. Sure. It's a story that I've moved on from, and if you look at the way that I live today, you wouldn't ever know that side of my map is even there unless I talk about it and put it on display. Now, for some of us, there may be sides of our map that we don't want to talk about. Like you were saying, Nathan, there could be great struggles, and the freedom that we have with understanding this part of our inner landscape is, even though it's part of our life, and we may not be ready for a variety of reasons to share and put that part of our life on display, we can still shape our lives in a way where that part remains hidden or remains tucked away. Only a few people may know that it's there, but it's still vital for the composition of who we are, how we navigate our lives, who we value, and what we choose to do with our life.
And it's a map that it's a metaphor. So it's not like you're stuck now with this one map.
Right.
There is another side. There is another one to be created. There are times, I think, where we just ask for a redo and almost select a new piece of map paper and put down stakes and allow life to do the folding.
Some people look at their inner landscape, and this happens in our one-to-one conversations a lot. And that is, someone will talk about, a time in their life where there's a lot of struggle. And they may say something in our one-to-one conversation, like, I haven't talked about this in 10 years. But it's still there, and they don't have it on display, but they will remind themselves through reflection of how important that struggle was. Yeah. The converse is also true. I've had several conversations with people where they will talk about a part of their life that was fantastic. They felt so alive. Everything was going right. And it's this time of abundance and flourishing and sustainability. But no one knows that part of the map because for some reason they're just in a different landscape altogether. But still they have this rich part of their life just there. And I think that's part of why we continue to move forward. I read somewhere about maps in preparation for today, and whoever was writing was talking about how maps are always in movement. And they didn't say that we are moving through the map. They were saying maps are always in movement. And the implication is that like our physical being is itself a map. And it's moving, it's changing, it's evolving, and it's growing. And that reminded me of something else about the nature of maps. Now, this is just, I don't know if it's just how my little quirky mind works, but as I look at someone's map, I think that there are different seasons represented on the maps as well. And just because you're going through a time where you feel like the leaves are falling off and everything's getting barren, there's a reason why we're journeying through that season of our map, because there's a spring that's coming. And sometimes just that understanding. And Linda and I had these conversations too of like, this isn't forever, it's just for now. This is temporary. We know that a new season's coming. And just that reminder of the seasonal nature of the landscapes that we live in, it's just part of, I think, what it means to be human. And also in this, to remind ourselves that through every season, there is an intentional shaping that's happening for the preparation for what's coming next. And to understand that shaping will never cease. Shaping is always happening. There's just so much there.
There's so much, and I think there's so much that it starts to feel complicated.
Right.
And sometimes the questions are, okay, well, am I supposed to know this map, or how big should it be, and what color should it be, and is it supposed to be this, these dimensions? And once again, we're inviting a little bit more simplicity. Use a question like a springboard. What does your map look like? Where was a place of growth, pivot, challenge, change?
Yeah.
What was a map of the literal map of the neighborhood you grew up in? Right. So,
what story is that map telling about you?
and we find that using the metaphor of map gets people thinking out of the everyday. It's a question that they haven't wrestled with. I remember the first time that I asked our daughter, she was maybe 10, I asked her, like, well, who do you sit next to in class? And she had so much fun describing it that she's like, can I do it for my next class? She mapped out all of her classes, where the teacher would walk. She was using this metaphor as a map of a seating chart to teach me, to invite me into where she lives and how she navigates every day. So we don't want to get wound around like, well, what is this, right or wrong? Use it as a springboard. Even when you hear map, what kind of map are you seeing and experiencing?
Yeah.
One of the things I think is really important to this conversation is to remind ourselves that we're not alone in the interpretation of our inner landscape. There are so many people in our lives that have been a part of our lives, that are part of our lives now, or that are coming to help us read, to interpret, and to navigate how it is that we're understanding ourselves now, to understand where we've come from, and to help prepare us for what's going forward. And so in this process, I think that it's helpful for all of us to be reminded to ask for help from various teachers and mentors and coaches and guides and just the wise people that are around us to help us understand what some of the next steps are, understand how to get stuck. Sometimes it's important to remind us that we're in a valley and we mistook it for a mountaintop. There's just something about the nature where we emotionally get lost. And in that emotionally getting lost, we mistakenly identify the landmarks for what they're not, because we perceive them to be something different than they actually are. And sometimes it just takes a new set of eyes to look at where we are and to help us understand that we're not lost. We are actually right where we need to be, and we simply needed to ask for help to understand which direction to take the next step. There are people there to help us.
And in true Brian Schubring fashion, these teachers all start with the letter E. So teachers are brought to you by the letter E. How will you interpret your map? E, experts are those that are experienced among you. Next is explorers, those that will help you understand where you've been and maybe invite you to take paths that are unknown. It's also important to have the teachers that are empaths, the third word that starts with the letter E, those that can walk through the emotional terrain with you, help give language to you and understanding about what you might be experiencing or the emotions that are swirling around you.
That's good.
And the fourth one is entertainers, brought to you by the letter E. Brian, you speak about that. Entertainers.
I've learned that there are just times in life where you just need to be entertained. And there are people that are nearer to you that just have a joke to tell, a turn of phrase that really helps lighten your perspective. What do you call the wife of a hippie? A Mississippi.
A Mississippi.
Like even that, it's just...
I mean, that's not exactly how
insert
I
like the
that joke.
applause
Go
there
on.
in the podcast. Like just make it really happen.
Right.
So thinking about what are your maps and who are going to help you understand the reading of your maps.
That's good. Brian and Linda, we've given people a lot to think about. There's a lot of sort of metaphor. There's some very practical things. We didn't even necessarily get into the unfolding and refolding part. That's going to be another episode. But if you were to summarize or create some sort of very succinct final thought, I'm going to ask both of you to do this separately. What would that be as we talk about maps and the important role that they play in our lives?
And my invitation for all of us is to trust the map. There are so many things that are hidden within our own landscape that are there for us to discover to help us along the way. And my hope is that we take the time to discover something new every day that will help us in leading the way.
Because in doing so, you learn to love your map, to not be ashamed of it, not just hide it away, but put dignity and compassion towards how you've been created and wired and how you go about your life.
Thank you for listening to the Leadership Vision Podcast, our show helping you build positive team culture. If you found value from this episode or any of our other resources, we would appreciate it if you would subscribe to our email newsletter, follow us on all the socials, and perhaps most importantly, share this with someone you think could benefit from this. And if you haven't picked up your copy of Unfolded, Lessons in Transformation from an Origami Crane, make sure to get yours on Amazon or wherever good books are sold. I'm Nathan Freeburg.
I'm Linda Schubring.
And I'm Brian Schubring.
And on behalf of our entire team, thanks
Thanks
for listening.
For listening.